Hello gamers, I am Mike TheZorch. Today we're not going to be covering any kind of gameplay. Today we're going to be talking about the recent purchase of Intellivision by Atari on today's Retro Spotlight. I'm a child of the 70s and 80s. I grew up throughout the 70s and I grew up in the 80s during a time when home computers started to become a thing and game consoles were just getting started. The golden age of the arcades, I lived through that. I lived through the video game crash. I saw all that happen. Atari and Intellivision, Intellivision was from Mattel Electronics, and Atari was, again, its own company. They went at it like Nintendo and Sega, with celebrities in their ads and just flooding the airwaves with their advertisements for their systems, trying to get people to get interested in them. They even had these displays in Kmart where you could select a game with a button and play them. Atari had this big machine. You push a button and you play one of dozens of games. Intellivision had the same thing. Television was slightly more advanced than the 2600. Technically, it is a 16-bit machine, but because they put a 16-bit CPU on a package with just 40 pins, it wasn't addressed as a 16-bit processor. So a lot of sources say it was 8-bit, but electronically, in the chip, it was 16-bit. But that didn't mean that its graphics were radically more advanced, like the difference between NES and Super NES. Nothing drastic like that. We're talking early technology from the 70s here. While they were slightly more advanced and the Intellivision was in stereo, the Intellivision had more memory. The 2600 only had like 128 bytes of memory, whereas the Intellivision had 1K of memory. Intellivision could display 16 colors. The 2600 could do 128 colors, but I think they had to do some like weird techniques in order to get them all to display. They couldn't display them all at once. It's complicated. You'd have to watch some videos about making games for the 2600 and the little tricks that they had to do in order to get games to even work on that hardware. So it was mostly built using off-the-shelf parts. When they say off-the-shelf, it means that you could easily source it from the companies that made them. Though Atari did design some of their own chips for, getting the visuals out to televisions. They did design their own chips for that, for the 2600 and 5200 and later. But I grew up with these machines. I never owned an Intellivision. I always wanted one. But I did get to play one whenever we ever went to Kmart. My mom and her friends and her kids would all pile in the car. We would go out to Kmart and they would go shopping for clothes for us. We would all go to the electronics section and mess around with the VIC-20, typing stuff in the VIC-20, and we'd sit there and it would be funny to type fuck on the keyboard, there in the store, and people would just walk by and you'd see fuck, all written down on the screen when we walked by. And we'd go over to the display for the Intellivision and the 2600, and people would be playing games on those. And the Intellivision had this odd disc controller, whereas the 2600 had a joystick, and it had the Intellivision had this keypad, and the games in the boxes would have this plastic template that you would slip into the controller so you'd know what the buttons do and everything. It was a different era, a different time. And so I'm a big advocate for game preservation. I've stated this before. I believe that if you're not selling something, if you're not making it available to people, you really shouldn't have a right to complain when they download it. You know, if people are forced to turn to piracy to get something when they want it, and you're refusing to offer it, you're refusing to sell it, you really shouldn't have any right to complain when they do. You really shouldn't. But just because, hey, it's my IP, you know what? You're a company, you're supposed to be out there to make money. If there's a demand for a product and you're not meeting that demand and people are going around you to get it, that is not a them problem, it's a you problem. Gibbon said it right. Piracy is not a pricing problem, it's an availability problem. If you're not making it available, people are going to pirate it. Deal with it. And that's Nintendo's problem. They're not making their older games available. They should be doing what Atari is doing with their games. Atari has been doing very well at getting their games out into people's hands. You know, these are older games and their graphics are really simplistic based on what's available now, but they are still fun to play. These games are timeless. They're still just loads of fun to play. You can get Atari Vault for console and on Steam. You can get the Atari 50 Anniversary Collection that has, you know, it has like a timeline with videos and different stuff that shows you from beginning to end of Atari Corporation, from, you know, their start to, say, the end of the Jaguar era. They have all that. Plus they have a bunch of games, and they have a few of the remastered, the reforged games in that as well. They have a few of those in there for you to enjoy. But they have a lot of the classic stuff from the 2600, 5200, Atari 800, which was their best-selling, well, actually the best-selling 8-bit computer from Atari was the Atari 800 XL. That was their bestseller. That was their redesign of the 800. The Atari Lynx handheld and the Atari Jaguar. Yes, they've included Jaguar in it. They didn't include their best game for the Jaguar. They included one of them, which was Tempest 2000, but they couldn't include Alien vs. Predator. I wish they had included that, because that is probably the best game for that console. But they're really good at getting their games out there to people, and this is a big deal for game preservation. What's Nintendo's problem? Why aren't they doing this too? They're trying to slowly drip feed people games on the Nintendo Switch, older games. Sometimes the stuff that they release is not really the ones that people are really interested in looking for. They're doing some of the more obscure stuff and none of the things that people are really looking for NES and Super NES and Game Boy and whatnot. And some of the emulation that they're doing is not that great either. And they should be, you know, maybe teaming up with Atari, with Digital Eclipse, and releasing collections onto other platforms. Their older 8, 16-bit games into collection. Maybe a Nintendo collection would be great. Release that on PS4, Xbox, Switch, and Steam. Stop trying to drip feed these things via your convoluted online service that you're trying to mimic Xbox Live or PSN, and you're not doing it right service. Stop trying to drip feed people these games and release them correctly. And you would discover that piracy would go down. You know, if I could just launch a game that had a collection of, Nintendo games on it, like Nintendo 64 and old 8-bit NES and 16-bit Super NES and stuff, and maybe some GameCube stuff. If you had that out there, if I could load up, an emulated with good emulation, an emulated version of Mario Sunshine on Steam in a Nintendo collection, that would be great. That would actually sell really well. That would be more money in Nintendo's pocket, in their coffers, than they could even hope to dream of if they did this. But they're not. And this is why Atari is making money. Atari made enough money to be able to buy the Intellivision brand and 200 games. Why? Because they're actually doing the smart thing. They're getting their games out into the hands of people, and people are buying them rather than pirating them. You've seen Atari cry and scream about people pirating games for their systems, for 2600, 5200, 800, Lynx, or Jaguar, or their later 16-bit computers. That's another idea, Atari. Do another collection, or to the Atari 50 anniversary collection, include games from your 16-bit era computers. If you can get the rights to those, to a lot of them, because there were a lot of games, a lot of good stuff to your 16-bit machines, your 16-bit computers, put those in that collection, release those. You will make a ton of money, because there's people who are very nostalgic about those machines, who loved them and who would love to play those games again. You would make a ton of money. You would sell a ton more copies of those games, or maybe release another collection that focuses on your 16-bit computers and games from them. Do that. Get the rights to as many of those games as you can, and release them in the packet. And I guarantee you, you will make money from those. Get them out there onto the consoles, onto Xbox, PlayStation, Switch, Steam. I guarantee you will make money. I guarantee you. And this is why Nintendo is struggling with piracy, because they are drip feeding us those games, making it difficult for us to get a hold of them. There's whole libraries of games from Nintendo that we just can't play because of the way they're doing. And it's limiting the amount of money they could be making. Anyway, I'm getting off of my soapbox. This is a big deal. This is a big deal for game preservation. If they do release collections for the Intellivision, they do add Intellivision games to the Atari 50, which I don't think they will for that, but they could release like an Intellivision Vault or something made by Digital Eclipse. They could release something like that, like a collection of their best games. Hopefully, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons is part of that collection. I really hope so, because that's one of the Intellivision's best games. It's one of the best games for that machine. Anyway, thank you for watching. I've been Mike TheZorch. If you like this video, consider subscribing to Gamers Bay. Click that bell icon. And don't forget to follow Gamers Bay on X. You'll find that link below in the description below. We're also on MeWe, a social media service, now a decentralized social media service that does not collect your data, does not have ads. Anyway, I've been Mike TheZorch, and I will be back with another retro spotlight with games from yesteryear. See you then.